To God be the glory.
We welcome you now to the Warren Flew debate. Does God exist? Dr. Flew affirms, I know that God does not exist.
Perhaps I'd better start with these proposed goings-on in North Texas. If it is in some way derivable as a consequence from the assertion that God, as Dr. Warren conceives God, will do these things in North Texas at such and such a time, then indeed the claims about God are in this way testable and falsifiable. Of course, part of the difficulty of handling things in this area is that so many different notions of God have been held, and quite often radically different notions are held by people who don't think of themselves as holding different notions. But of course, if you so arrange it that you have got a concept of God from which you are able to infer validly that if such and such a being exists, then in such and such circumstances this will happen, then indeed you've got a thoroughly testable notion. But I don't think that really is the one we've got to deal with. The second thing which I need to say is I know that people feel, not only Dr. Warren, that I've not really been offering any reasons for being an atheist. I'm afraid I think that I have. I mean, you may well think they're not good enough, but I think that I have. In the in the two things that I've been saying about the first stage in any systematic apologetic. If, after all, the things that are said about this proposed being are contradictory, then to say that there is such a being, thus and thus described, is like saying there's a round square or an unmarried husband. And if this is so, this is a frightfully good reason for saying there's no such thing. It's exactly the sort of reason we have for saying there's no such thing as a married bachelor and so on. And with regard to the other sort of objection I was offering under that first heading, the objection that what may have started as some sort of testable hypothesis about a power behind the world has, by various sorts of qualification, been made untestable, then it seems to me the situation is strictly analogous to the situation with regard to, say, fairies. None of us say cautiously about fairies, it hasn't been proved, or I'm agnostic about fairies. There's a bit of evidence for, a bit of evidence against, and I'm waiting for more to come in. What we all say, if and insofar as we believe that the whole thing has been so qualified that it's untestable, what we all say is in these circumstances there ain't no such thing. And that's the reaction that I'm having in the case of an untestable hypothesis about the existence of God. So now I'm going to go on to the second stage of the sort of systematic examination of a view about God, which I think is the proper examination for such claims to have. Allowing, what of course I don't allow, that we've got an adequate notion, the question then arises, what sort of reason have we for saying that this notion has application, that there actually is a being corresponding with this notion? Now, I think there's no doubt at all that almost every believer who is asked to offer some sort of reason for believing will sooner or later, and usually sooner, offer some version of what has traditionally been called the argument from design, but what I, in a fastidious way, call the argument to design. I won't, I think, trouble you with my reasons for adopting that little fad. Anyway, let's call it the argument to design, or if you want to call it argument from design, follow the old practice. The sort of move I have in mind is that someone said, good heavens, how can you be in any doubt about the existence of God? Look at the regularity of the seasons, or look at the sun and the moon, or look at the inordinate complexity and integration of the human eye, or just consider yourself. Who made it all? Well, let's have a look at this sort of argument, which is certainly the sort of argument which I think has seemed persuasive to most people, and which occupies a major place, I would have thought, in thinking about this subject for most people. And let's take some examples. Let's consider the inordinate complexity of the human eye, and then say, who made it all? Well, if you just consider the most obviously available evidence, the answer is no one made it, it growed. And similarly with human children. All of us who know what are curiously described as the facts of life know that we know how babies begin and so on, and that they just grow, provided with food and all that. Whereas there are other very complicated things with which, at least with the outsides of which we're familiar, like commuters, and for that matter, the complex American automobiles, which we equally have good reason for saying did not grow, but were made in Detroit, usually. Now, this may seem to you cheap and inadequate and somehow missing the point. But, and it's certainly not the last thing that I'm going to say about this. There's more to be said. But it certainly is a necessary first thing to point out, because it's a thing that people curiously overlook. That all of us who've been around a bit know very well that, at least if the words are understood in a fairly straightforward way, that eyes aren't made at all. It's not that they're made by some invisible being, or at least it's not obvious that they're made by some invisible being. As far as we can see, they just grow and are not made, whereas there are other very complicated things, though not, I think, as complicated and integrated as the human eye, which we also know were made and which did not grow. Well, no doubt it will be felt that this is somehow missing the point. Surely the claim will be, it's not exactly, you've got it wrong, Flu. It's the universe as a whole that must have been designed, which can't just be there or just always have been there. Well, let's see if I can come at this. And I think what I will try to do is to expound within the very brief framework of this third slot the argument about this argument to design offered by David Hume, a Scottish philosopher of the 18th century. As a matter of fact, we celebrate the bicentennial of David Hume's death in the same year as you celebrate the bicentennial of the independence of your republic. And there was a certain connection between the two events, because Hume indicated his support for the American Revolution even before it started, and made a remark which some of you may think will have a certain bearing on events in this upcoming November. He said, "I am an American in my principles and believe that these colonists should be allowed to govern or misgovern themselves as they see fit. Well, his argument about the argument to design. Now, he started from recognizing that everyone would say if they saw something like a half-completed building but didn't see any building workers around, which is the normal situation on a British building site. You don't see any work going on. If you saw this, then you would be entitled to infer that somewhere there must have been some builders who've completed the miserable amount of work that has so far been done, and if it's a certain sort of building, that there will have been an architect. And so the argument to design would go, if you would all argue like that, or if you found a watch on the sand of a desert island, you'd all argue, this watch must have been made somewhere. It's a mark of human visitation or habitation. Yes, of course, everyone would agree that to proceed in this way is a sound argument. Well, now, the advocate of the argument to design will say, yes, so by parity of reasoning, we must proceed from marks of design in the universe to the existence of a designer who made and sustains that universe. Now, this is the challenge that Hume tried to meet and which I think can be met. The argument to design urges that we ought to apply, in the case of the universe as a whole, exactly the same sort of procedures as we would all agree it would be proper to apply to this half-completed building or to the watch lying around on the beach. And Hume's problem in challenging this argument is to show that the parity of reasoning does not apply, to show that there are relevant differences between the case of the universe as a whole and the case of any of these things which suggest design within the universe. And he meets this challenge in two ways, by pointing out that there are indeed two differences between the two cases, two enormous differences. There's a fundamental difference in the suggested cause, and there's a fundamental difference in the suggested effect. And they are, in both cases, things that are, by definition, if they exist at all, unique. Let's consider first, because it does tie up with the earlier stages in the argument, let's consider the supposed creator, the supposed cause of the universe as a whole. How does this differ from the suggested causes in the case of the half-finished building? It differs in this way, that the suggested cause is a being, by definition, if he exists, unique. There would be, if there's any God, there's certainly only one. If there's any theist God, there's only one. It's a being whose powers are supposed to pass our understanding, a being, in most thinking, not a member of any ordinary species or class. And of course, these characteristics, these unique characteristics, have consequences. Supposing you postulate a cause, there have been some people. Now, there are lots of people around, and our knowledge of people enables us to infer certain things that would happen, certain features that the situation would have if people were responsible for bringing it about. But there aren't any inferences that we can legitimately make, revelation apart, about how the God of theism can reasonably be expected to behave if there is such a being at all. We can't, for instance, infer that if there is a God, there will be a universe, or that it will have any particular characteristics. Indeed, many theologians go out of their way to say that the whole creation was in no way necessary. It was a matter of just an absolute free decision by the Creator. So, The suggestion that there is a God whose activities explain the existence of the universe cannot be made to work like any ordinary scientific theory. Now, consider the supposed effect. Now, the supposed effect is the universe as a whole, and the universe as a whole is everything there is with the possible exception of God. So in the nature of the case, there can be only one of them. Now, what is the nature of our argument from the uncompleted building site to the building workers? It's surely, in fact, not a matter of just you look at a building site and you can just see that this must be the work of human agents. It is that we have been around a long time, some of us more than others, and we know that this sort of thing is not brought about without human agency. We've got a lot of experience of half-finished building sites. If you're British, half-finished building sites is about the only sort of building site you do have experience of. But you've certainly had a lot. And the argument is one from our experience that these things do not come about except in a certain sort of way. But now, we can't argue in this way about the universe. We can't say, ooh, there are lots of remarkable things about the universe, and my goodness, there are. And these remarkable features about the universe, and for that matter, the universe itself, could only come about in this way. Or if we do argue like this, it can't be an argument from experience, because in the nature of the case, we are only acquainted with one universe. So, in answer to the challenge, well, if you allow that there can be a legitimate argument from things like half-finished building sites and so on to the builders, or from watches to watchmakers, why don't you allow an argument from the universe to a universe maker? The answer is that this second sort of argument differs from the first sort in two crucial respects. It differs because the proposed cause is essentially unique, and it's a sort of cause from the supposed operation of which we can draw no inferences at all. And second, it differs because the alleged effect of this supposed cause is also, by definition, unique. And hence, in the nature of the case, we can't say that anything about the universe as a whole is either probable or improbable, likely or unlikely. There just is one universe. It's the only our experience of this is the only experience of universes that we have or can have. So I'll now go just a little bit beyond Hume's argument here and say something which is strongly suggested by Hume, which I believe that Hume came to believe in his last years, though he didn't say it outright. It seems to me that what one's got to do is to take it that whatever are discovered by our scientists to be the most fundamental laws of nature, the fundamental principles that apply in the universe, the most fundamental features of reality, just are the fundamental features of reality. That there's no room for any there's no requirement for any explanation of these, certainly not for an argument from the fact that there are, say, regularities to the conclusion that there must be a designer. There would only be a compulsive argument from the fact that there are general regularities in the universe. My goodness, people discover fundamental laws of nature. If we were if we had some independent knowledge of universes apart from our knowledge of this one, and were hence able to say that, well, universes are only like this when they're made by God, or alternatively, if we were able to say that, well, if this universe were left to its own devices, it would be irregular, so we must argue that there must have been a God to impose the regularity on it. Well, This is the end of my first argument against the main argument for the existence of God. And at the end of this, I've also been suggesting how it seems to me we ought to look at the universe and its fundamental features.
Dr. Flew, gentlemen moderators, ladies and gentlemen, I come to you before you now for the last speech that I shall have this evening. And I would like to point out that Dr. Flew has spent this last speech almost entirely in a reply to the argument to design. This, of course, is a negative stance. It presupposes that I'm in the affirmative and that I have given the argument to design, which, of course, is not the case at all. He still has allowed this part of his discussion to close without having made a precisely formulated argument. He has, as I've indicated, talked about, come very close to doing so. He's hinted at it. He's indicated it's a matter of curiosity. He hints at perhaps punishment of man in eternity as incompatible with God, but he hasn't really formulated an argument to do so, and I will come to that in just a moment. But I want to show you now that this man has let his part in the affirmative of his discussion come to a close, and I would like to have on the screen chart number 9A1. Now, I've presented several pages of these things since this man has affirmed a universal negative. And you must understand the basic difference between affirming, as I have, simply the fact that God exists, and his affirming that he knows that God does not exist. That means there is practically an unlimited number of things which he absolutely must know in order to know that God does not exist. How much attention has he given to these matters? As I have called them to his attention again and again, he has paid absolutely no attention whatever. I have shown that he must know, he must absolutely know, he must give us the proof. In such matters, I'll not take the time to read them all again, that matter really does exist non-contingently, that matter is all that exists, that matter has always existed, that no one piece of matter is worth any more than any other piece of matter, that by sheer chance rocks and dirt, that is dead matter, became living matter, that by sheer chance rocks and dirt became conscious matter, that by sheer chance rocks and dirt became human beings, that by sheer chance rocks and dirt developed in such a way that a woman was on earth before any human baby, or that by sheer chance rocks and dirt developed in such a way that a baby was first on earth before any woman. But he's already admitted that evolution is absolutely impossible, even though it's crucial to his case, and he now has let 2 evenings go by without replying to the argument that I've given you, which is given as precisely, as logically, as validly as it could be, to show that the implication of atheism is that man has somehow or other come from some lower non-human form of life, and he has admitted by the answer to the questions that it could not have occurred in that way. Now, friends, let him not deceive you by coming here and spending his time in a role that was entirely out of line with his obligation, by functioning in a negative role when he was supposed to be in an affirmative role. I have not been in the affirmative either last night or tonight. I have not given the argument to design, and he therefore was out of place in even being involved in such. However, I want to point out to you that he paid no attention to the fact that in answer to question number 9, he answered this: if the Mars probe discovered a rock with a king's head carved on it and with a message of gratitude to the king, then men on Earth could know at some time an intelligent being had been on Mars. You see, he therefore admits that by simply seeing this empirical evidence, he could know that some intelligent being had been on Mars. The truth of the matter is, atheists in the world were terribly excited when somebody thought they had seen the single letter B on a rock. You remember that. They were all ready to draw the conclusion, therefore intelligent life is on Mars. No doubt something as smart or smarter than human beings from the single letter B. And now he has admitted that if he found such a thing as this, he'd have to admit that there was an intelligent being there. Now, his dodge about the fact that we grow as over against a car being made simply will not do. I want to see on the screen chart number 42A8. 42A8. Now you'll note on this screen we have a natural hand and a mechanical hand. I have asked the question, is it true or false? The hand on the left, a natural hand, was it planned and designed? And he answers, no, it is not. On the right, the hand that is mechanical, he says it was planned and designed. Now, friends, I submit to you that the natural hand is tremendously greater than any mechanical hand that man has ever made. Dr. Flew would say the same thing if a man had a synthetic, had a bone, a thigh bone, reaching from his thigh bone socket to his knee, made out of synthetic material that has no bone marrow in it, and man cannot live without bone marrow. Dr. Flew would say that the bone made out of synthetic material is great. It is so great that it demands a designer, someone with intelligence, someone to plan it. But now tonight he has alleged that the real natural thigh bone, which we must have, which could not have evolved according to his admissions, simply can be accounted for by sheer chance. Nothing more than a whirlwind blowing against the mountainside and a human thigh resulting from it. Now there's further the matter, which I've had before him as a matter of a negative argument. I'm not presenting this to say that here is design and therefore God. I'm presenting it as material which he must know in order to know that God does not exist. Let's have chart number 9U. Now, Dr. Flew, you have about a minute and a half in your next speech, and I want you to do the best you can to deal with this matter. Here is an important matter because it shows the utter impossibility of your whole case. If evolution is not true, then atheism's not true. And whatever else you may say about it, you'll not get over that fact. And your admission regarding the fact that human beings could neither have been transformed nor born from non-human beings really concedes the whole affair. But let's just pile information on top of information. Notice here I've shown you just briefly the human respiratory system, the bronchial tube, and the alveoli down in the lungs. Now let's look at the next chart, chart number 9V. And here we look at a detail of the respiratory system, a part of it, the alveolus, the blood vessel, and the air. Now we go quickly on to a description of what happens here. These alveoli are grape-like bunches of very small air sacs. Each person has approximately 750 million of these. All of them together likely have a surface area which is about 25 times that of the skin. Spread out flat, they would probably cover as much as 600 square feet. Compare a room of about 30 by 20 feet. Each alveolus is covered with a network of capillaries. These capillaries are so small that red blood cells must pass through them one cell at a time. Through the very thin walls of the capillary, the blood gives up its waste, that is carbon dioxide, and takes on refreshing, life-giving oxygen. Now note carefully that without this exchange, this interchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen, no human being could live more than a few moments. The body's entire blood supply must pass through these small blood vessels every few minutes. The blood goes in one end a dark blue-black and out the other a bright cherry red. Day and night this process must go on without interruption. It is clear from these facts that man did not evolve by mere chance from rocks and dirt and water and gas or whatever he wants to put by way of dead matter. Now note carefully, here's the point that I'm making. In order for Dr. Flew to know that God does not exist, he must know. He cannot merely give it as an idle guess or a curiosity. He must know that the human respiratory system owes its origin ultimately to dead matter. That once there was dead matter, not a single living cell, not a single living thing, nothing with mind or intelligence, no human being at all, and that this marvelous system grew. Oh, he says if you find an automobile, or if you find something of that sort, then you have to reason back to some intelligence. But my friends, when we realize, let's look at chart number 42A1. When we realize that as you look at this chart, that there has to be the interchange between the air passage and the blood passage of oxygen and carbon dioxide, which must occur, for a period of stoppage no longer than 5 minutes, And yet every evolutionist would say that for such a complexity to develop, it would require not only thousands, but millions of years. You can see the utter absurdity of the claim that Dr. Flew has made in regard to the argument to design. Dr. Flew, I suggest that you would have been much better off to have stayed or have gotten into the affirmative rather than to try to answer an argument which has not been made, and therefore put yourself in the situation of facing this kind of information. For a person to conclude that an automobile manifests such qualities, such characteristics, as to demand the conclusion that man has, or that it was designed and planned by an intelligent being, and then to say that the human body, the respiratory system, which cannot not function for longer than 5 minutes, merely grew, is about as great a monstrosity as I can imagine. Now, in the next speech, Dr. Flew said, in the last speech, said nothing more about the problem of evil. He has alleged, and again, he has not really made the argument. Now, it is not my responsibility to have made his argument. He has said, in effect, look, here is God, and God is supposedly infinite in love and power, and therefore there is something in the world, evil, that conflicts with that. I have pointed out to him that even his own colleagues admit that that so-called contradiction is not immediately evident, that it requires at least some quasi-logical rules. What attention did he pay to that? Absolutely nothing. He has said it is simply monstrous for one to conclude that the God who provides an explanation for this world could punish anyone forever. The trouble with Dr. Flew is sin doesn't really mean very much to him. He projects himself on the outside of the universe, somewhat in the position of God, and judges God and concludes what God can do and cannot do, what he must do, all from a concept in his own mind of both God and evil. But I've already pointed out to you that he cannot do it merely from the concept of God, and he has not replied to that at all. He depends upon some empirical fact, which he must bring in these additional rules in order to give an argument to, but which he has not done. Now, friends, if God is infinite in love and goodness, and he is, as it's clear that he sent his son to die for every person in this world, he sent Jesus Christ to die even for Dr. Flew, even though he rejects him. God is infinite in love. He loves every person in this world, even the most wicked man. He wants him to be saved from his sin. Dr. Flew cannot escape his own conscience, which is God-given. That's why he rejects the monstrosities of the Nazis, because of his God-given conscience. Now, if God is infinite in love and goodness, why would we expect that God would not be infinite in justice? How could we even follow a God who would tolerate evil, who would tolerate sin, who, when we have been given our probationary time here on this earth in wicked rebellion to God, and then to come into the judgment and God to say, well, I see that you do not love me. You care nothing for truth and righteousness, but truth and righteousness is nothing to me. I'm as wicked as you are. My friends, we must understand that God is infinite in all of his attributes. I wish Dr. Flew had earlier come on and presented his argument for evil. It is, as a matter of fact, the only argument atheists have. Why didn't in his first speech come up and give you a logical, precise argument for it? I have pages and pages to answer, but he has not given it. My friends, I want you to see that basic to the Christian case, he has said that you cannot explain the various elements in the total situation without involving yourself in logical contradiction, but he has not shown that. But I'm going to show you anyway that there are these propositions that are involved in Christian theism that do not involve logical contradiction, and hell is among it. The punishment of people in this world, the suffering, the tribulation, all involved to make this the perfect place for men to live and make their decision to either love and serve God or to reject him. Oh, you may laugh and say, you mean to say that this world is perfect? It is perfect for the purpose God had in creating it. He did not, as Mr. Flew's favorite philosopher, apparently David Hume, would allege, that it's some sort of hedonistic paradise. God did not intend for this world to be our home. It is here for us to make our decision either for God. The evidence for God is everywhere, as has been indicated. The everlasting power and divinity of God are made known by the things that are seen. And we must understand that in this world, we have a chance to make a free decision. Dr. Flew, in self-contradiction, demands that we be free, that God make us so that we always freely make the right decision. This involves a self-contradiction that man is free and man is not free. You cannot have guaranteed freedom, Dr. Flew. That's one of the most absurd ideas that I ever heard of. Now this is telling us that in this world there is suffering. I'm indicating that Dr. Flew is not, as he hints at, simply saying the very concept of God is self-contradictory. He does not really do that. What he does is says, here is God, there's something about God that contradicts with this empirical fact or with this punishment out there in eternity. You see, he's not really dealing only with the concept of God. Do not let him deceive you into thinking that he is. I put a chart on the screen which showed the various attributes of God. I challenged him to deal with it. He has not said one word about it. You see, he's got to try to bring in empirical fact in order to even try to make his case, but he hasn't done it. He hasn't formulated a logical argument to do it. But friends, now notice here, involved in this matter of eternal punishment, it simply fits with the infinite justice of God. As a matter of fact, I could not serve a God who was deficient in any one of his attributes. To say that God is not omniscient, or that he's not omnipotent, or that he's not omnipresent, or that he is not completely just, infinite in his justice, his holiness, and his righteousness, and therefore that he dare not punish men, is to simply say that he isn't God. I've sat in philosophy classes for weeks on end, and men talk about God, 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 and all they mean is some kind of force in nature. When you take away from God his infinite justice, he is no longer God, Dr. Flew. That's just as much a part of his nature as his infinite love. And because he loved you, he gave his son, Jesus Christ, to die. And it's made clear in the sacred scriptures, someday all of us will stand before God in judgment to give an account for how we have used our intelligence, for how we have used our opportunities in this life. There's something more to a human being, even as you yourself have recognized, than mere matter, mere molecules in motion. If all there is to a man is molecules in motion, there is no such thing as freedom. There is only physical reaction to physical stimuli. Dr. Flew, you're nothing but a blob of matter. When this dog ate this baby in New York City a few days ago, would there have been any greater loss of value in the eating of that baby, or if there had been a baby pig in that room and he'd eaten both of them? Would there have been a bigger loss? They're both just matter in motion, according to Dr. Flew. But friends, to understand Christian theism, as I had hoped that Dr. Flew would come and say, make clear that he does understand Christian theism and what we're talking about. This involves these propositions, that God is omnipotent, that God is perfect in goodness, that God is omniscient, that God is perfect in justice. This is the very point that he's completely overlooked. To listen to him, you'd think he had never heard of the idea of holiness, of righteousness, of infinity and justice, and therefore that it's absolutely wrong to punish men in hell. Dr. Flew projects himself outside the universe, stands on some sort of platform which he invents, and stands in judgment of God and the whole process. I asked him from what platform he stood to make that kind of judgment. Further, sin, that which contradicts man's sonship to God and his brotherhood to man, and even Dr. Flew, as you have heard him, as he's talked about the monstrosities committed by not only the Nazis but the communists, he shows his brotherhood to man, at least some insight into it. Sin is that which contradicts man's sonship to God and his brotherhood to man, that which contradicts the will of God. That is the one intrinsic evil. It is not evil that there is evil in this world. God made the world to be inhabited, and he put free men here. And by their own decision, they have decided to go against the will of God. And that evil results in every case from an abuse of free moral agency. It is not the case that good is opposed to evil in such a way that a good thing always eliminates evil as far as it can. Now, these are matters that Dr. Flew should have taken up, should have given you in a precise, logical way, dealt with them, argued against them, but he has not done so. It is not the case that there are no limits to what an omnipotent thing or being can do. It is not the case that a good omnipotent thing always eliminates evil completely. A good omnipotent thing exists, that is God. It is not the case that there is a logical contradiction in the conjunction of the propositions which say that God exists and that evil exists. There is no such contradiction. He has merely hinted at it. He has not given the argument. And you'll leave this building tonight with his case in the affirmative, closed,
without his having done so. Is that the time?
Thank you very much.
Guaranteed freedom is self-contradictory. If that's so, then those who are saved are either not free or not actually safe, are they? Second thing, about this automobile and the respiratory system, my argument is, and I think our argument is, when we proceed from looking at the automobile to it must have been designed, is not that it's a remarkable thing, so it must have been designed, but it's the sort of thing that we know is an artifact. Whereas with the respiratory system, it's the sort of thing which is indeed even more remarkable, but it's also the sort of thing which we know from all our experience does grow and is not made. Of course, this leaves open the question about whether the whole universe was made, but the first move is surely the one I've just made. Third thing, while we're about it, it's a mistake to think that someone who is, shall we say, less than enthusiastic about the moral characteristics of a God thus and thus described is judging God, whereas someone who is more enthusiastic is not. Both of them are, if you like, judging and saying that this term or that is appropriate. It's just that they have different views as to which is appropriate.
The churches of Christ are not only committed to the existence of God, but are also committed to the restoration of New Testament Christianity. We invite you to visit our services. Any questions or comments concerning this debate are welcome.